mourn and honor the memory of the Rebbe. On behalf of the Rabbinate of Sydney, I call upon Rabbi Apple, as representative of that Rabbinate, to say a few words.
It must have been about 2 weeks ago that we received a letter from our older daughter who lives in Yerushalayim, who wrote about how she, who is not a Lubavitcher, has not been brought up in a Hasidic household, but is the daughter of parents who brought her up with respect for Torah and respect for people of Torah. She wrote to us that the news of the passing of the Lubavitcher Rebbe brought her and her husband and children tremendous sadness because, to quote her words, he was the last of the Gedolei Hador, the last of the great leaders of the generation. I ask myself the question, what generation is it of which my daughter says he was the last of the Gedolei Hador? It is the post-Holocaust generation, the generation in which we would have been forgiven for imagining that Judaism was finished, that Orthodox Judaism in particular would never rise again, and that Kaddish should be said, God forbid, for our people and our tradition. And yet, we have the teaching, Lo Alman Israel. Israel is never entirely bereft. And the evidence that Lo Alman Israel in our generation has been the blessing which the Almighty has given us in the Gedolim, who have been like stars in these 50 years, stars shining again in order to show the way for the rebirth and the resurgence of the Jewish people and of Judaism. If one were to try to list the Gedolei Hador, one would, I believe, have to take a lesson out of a story of Chaim Nachman Bialik, who speaks about the Almighty being angry with the people of Israel for their neglect of the Torah and demanding that they send back to him the Torah and all the books of Torah learning, because they failed to learn them, to appreciate them, to love them, to live by them. And wagon load after wagon load of books, sforim, manuscripts and writings wended their way back to heaven. The procession was endless. The Almighty was comforted because Lo Alman Israel, because Israel was not bereft, and perhaps his judgment had been too hasty in imagining that Torah was finished. If one were to say that the procession of Gedolei Hador in these 50 years has been so long and so impressive that we could not name or even purport to name all of those who were members of that procession, it's already impressive. But history may well decide that of all of the Gedolei Hador, the Rebbe was, as my daughter suggests, the most phenomenal Jewish teacher and leader of our century. Leadership everywhere these days is generally mediocre. Perhaps because the mystique has been taken away by the media and the immediacy of the way in which every leader is seen and judged and found wanting. And yet the genius of the Rebbe was that those very same media that destroyed the mystique of other leaders, in fact, enhanced and reinforced his. His leadership was based on learning, yes, on intellect, on yirat shamayim, on the capacity to inspire, to lead, and to organize. I would suggest that above all, his leadership was exceptional and unique because of a flaring intuition of our generation. This generation of the post-Holocaust years was the generation in which Jews had to find their way home to Judaism. Despite the events that threatened Jewish faith and continuity and identity and commitment, Jews had to be found and Jews had to find Judaism. If any one leader has succeeded in finding Jews and in leading Jews to find their Judaism, it was this leader. We mitmagdim can perhaps never quite understand the exact nature of the bond between a Rebbe and his Hasidim. Sometimes we are critical of what we see to be certain excesses of enthusiasm. But there is no debate amongst Hasidim or amongst mitmagdim. There is no debate about the most crucial thing of all, which is that this Rebbe changed the face of the Jewish world more than did any other figure. There has been ample debate in recent years as to whether this is or is not the Messianic generation. Whether this is the Messianic generation, or how messianic this generation is. I believe the truth is that his achievement is truly messianic in stirring the spiritual awakening of countless people, making Jewish ideas and ways a talking point wherever Jews are and far beyond the Jewish world. My daughter is right. The last of the Gedolei Hador, perhaps the most phenomenal of all. So in the name of a grateful Jewish people, we salute his achievement, we salute his memory. Yehi zichro baruch. His memory will be a blessing. His memory will certainly ensure, in the most literal sense, Uval Tzion Goel, that the Redeemer, the Messiah, will come, please God, in our generation.
I'd like to now call upon my father to address us.
I do not represent